She was just a janitor's daughter mopping the floor in silence, until a single word from her lips silenced the entire office. The ninth floor of Whitestone and Harlow Corporate looked the same every morning. Polished glass walls, the scent of burnt coffee drifting from the break room, the quiet thrum of keyboards. People in tailored suits strode past without breaking stride, their eyes locked on phones or the glowing conference room screens ahead. And in the spaces between their hurried steps, Lena Marks moved like a shadow. 10 years old, blonde hair tied back into a neat braid, she trailed just behind her mother, Claire Marks, who pushed a battered cleaning cart toward the far hall. Claire's dark green janitor's uniform was freshly pressed, the only detail she could control in a job where she was meant to disappear. No one stopped. No one looked twice. Lena, wearing a pale yellow dress with a faint floral print, clutched a small paperback in one hand, its spine cracked, pages worn thin. The title was in a language no one here could read. Claire unlocked the staff supply closet, her key turning with a soft click. "Sit by the window, honey," she murmured. Lena nodded and slipped to the end of the corridor, settling cross-legged on the floor where sunlight poured through the glass. From here, she had a perfect view of the street below. Men in navy coats hurrying across crosswalks, a bus driver leaning out to shout something at a cyclist. She turned a page without glancing up. Inside the break room, two interns laughed about weekend plans. "Is that the janitor's kid?" One whispered, just loud enough for the word janitor to carry into the hall. The other glanced over, shrugged, and kept scrolling through his phone. In the glass reflection, Lena caught the look, the quick dismissal, the easy assumption, and went back to reading. A man in his 60s, silver hair cut close, walked past then paused. Richard Hale, CEO of Whitestone and Harlow, had the kind of presence that stilled a room without effort. His charcoal suit fit like it had been built for him. He scanned the hall, eyes sweeping over Lena without lingering. Just another employee's child, waiting. He moved on. Claire's mops swished softly in the next room, rhythmic, steady. The quiet work of someone the building relied on, though most forgot her name. Lena tucked her book into her lap. From her pocket, she pulled a folded scrap of paper covered in looping handwriting, some lines in English, some not. She stared at it for a moment, lips moving silently. Outside, the day brightened. Inside, the elevator dinged and more suits poured out, carrying conversations and coffees, parting around her like water around a stone. No one knew the stone could speak 9 different songs. Not yet. The morning at Whitestone and Harlow rolled on like a well-rehearsed play, every actor in costume, every line delivered without thought. Phones rang in muffled bursts. Printers spat out contracts. A muted news channel flickered in the lobby, the anchor's voice lost under the shuffle of heels on tile. Lena remained in her corner by the window, tracing her fingertip over the uneven edge of the paperback's cover. The pages smelled faintly of dust and rain. The book had been rescued from a thrift shop weeks ago. A woman in a cream blazer, badge clipped neatly to her lapel, approached with a paper cup in hand. "You can't sit here, sweetheart," she said, voice brisk but not unkind, eyes already flicking past toward the elevator. Lena stood, nodding once, slipping silently toward the corner near her mother's cart. Claire, kneeling to scrub a scuff mark from the marble floor, didn't look up. "They're busy," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. By mid-morning, the rhythm was predictable. Claire wiping down glass doors while Lena fetched clean rags, refilled the spray bottle, or simply stayed out of the way. She knew when the third-floor receptionist took her smoke break, when the copier jammed every other day, when the finance team ordered lunch early on Thursdays. To most, Lena was just there, the invisible extension of the cart her mother pushed, the shadow in the polished floors. A delivery man wheeled in a stack of boxes and muttered something in Spanish to the front desk. The receptionist's blank expression made clear she didn't understand. He tried again, slower. Still nothing. Lena's gaze flicked over. She spoke softly from where she stood, her words fluid and precise. The man's face lit up. He nodded, gave a quick thanks, and rolled his boxes toward the service elevator. The receptionist blinked at her, then back to her screen, tapping at the keyboard. "No, thank you." Claire caught her daughter's eye. There was a tiny smile there. Not pride, exactly, but something gentler, like the quiet confirmation of a truth only they shared. The day's small currents kept moving. Lena fetched a clean cloth, replaced an empty paper towel roll, waited by the cart while her mother signed for a shipment of cleaning supplies. At one point, a cluster of junior associates walked past, arguing over a case detail. Lena caught a word in their debate, a legal term from a language not their own, and mouthed the correct pronunciation under her breath. No one heard. By noon, the office air smelled faintly of reheated pasta and lemon disinfectant. Claire wrung out her mop, her hands reddened from the hot water, and they took a seat in the staff lounge, a cramped space with 2 vending machines and a window that faced the alley. Lena opened her book again. Claire opened a thermos of soup. Outside, the rain started. Neither of them noticed the man from earlier, Richard Hale, standing just beyond the doorway, watching for a beat too long before moving on. The rain drummed harder against the tall glass windows by mid-afternoon, blurring the skyline into a watercolor wash of gray. The sound seemed to slow the office's usual pulse. Fewer phone calls, more people lingering by the coffee machine. Claire was on her knees in the reception hall, scrubbing at a stubborn coffee stain in the carpet, when the elevator doors opened with a muted chime. Out stepped a man in a dark overcoat, dripping from the storm. His shoes left small puddles on the marble floor. A leather briefcase dangled from one hand. He scanned the lobby with impatience. "Is there anyone here who can help me?" His voice was accented, thick with something Eastern European. He held a folder, clearly important, clearly urgent. The receptionist rose halfway from her chair. Sir, if you'll take a seat, I can." "I cannot," the man cut in, shaking his head sharply. "I have meeting with board. But I am lost. I cannot find." He trailed off, muttering to himself in his own language. The receptionist's polite smile froze. From where she sat against the wall, Lena looked up. She knew that language. She'd read it before she ever heard it spoken, one of the first her late grandfather had taught her. Without thinking, she stood and crossed the short stretch of marble between them. "You're looking for the executive conference room," she said, but not in English. Her words carried the same rhythm as his, the same careful intonation. The man stopped mid-step, staring down at her. Then, as if unsure he'd heard correctly, he answered in the same language. "Yes." "Where is it?" She gestured toward the far corridor. "Take the elevator to the 12th floor, turn left. 3rd door. The sign will say Boardroom A." For a moment, the lobby was silent except for the rain against the glass. The man gave a short bow of his head. "Thank you, little one." He moved quickly toward the elevators. The receptionist's eyes followed him, then flicked to Lena. "You understood him?" Lena shrugged, glancing back at her mother. He was lost. She didn't elaborate. Claire was already back to work, her expression calm, but her shoulders a little straighter. 2 paralegals had paused in the hallway, whispering to each other. One of them leaned just enough to see around the corner where Lena had returned to her spot. From somewhere behind the glass walls of the corner office, Richard Hale's voice could be heard giving short, clipped instructions to his assistant. He stepped into the hall just in time to catch the tail end of the moment, the way everyone's attention had shifted, however briefly, toward the janitor's daughter. He didn't interrupt, but his eyes narrowed slightly, as though filing something away. And then the moment was gone, replaced by the familiar rhythm of ringing phones and squeaking shoes on polished floors. Richard Hale wasn't a man who lingered without reason. He moved through the halls like someone who'd been here since the walls were first painted, and in a way, he had. 30 years of this company's history were built on decisions he'd made, and every employee knew when his shadow passed by their desk. But now, instead of heading straight for the elevator, Richard stopped. He stood at the glass railing on the mezzanine, watching the floor below. Lena was back in her corner by the window, flipping her book open again as though nothing had happened. The lobby chatter had settled, but Richard had caught the tone earlier. The way people's voices dipped into surprise, the way eyes tracked her for just a beat too long. His assistant, Mara, joined him, a tablet in hand. "You wanted me to," she followed his gaze. "The janitor's kid." He didn't answer right away. "That man who came in dripping from the storm. Who was he?" Mara checked the log. "Visitor for the board. Name's Andrei Petrov. Investor from Bucharest. Doesn't speak much English." Richard's eyes didn't leave Lena. "And how did he find the boardroom?" Mara hesitated. "I think the girl told him." In his language. The faintest crease formed between Richard's brows. He shifted his stance, one hand resting lightly on the railing. "Interesting. Down below, Claire wheeled her cart toward the supply closet. Lena followed, stepping lightly to match her mother's stride. At one point, Lena glanced over her shoulder, not directly at Richard, but in his direction, as though she could feel the weight of being seen. She didn't smile. She didn't fidget. She just kept walking. Richard noticed the book tucked under her arm. He caught a glimpse of the title as they passed beneath a pool of light. Foreign lettering, not decorative but functional, the kind of script that only made sense if you'd learned it properly. He stayed at the railing until they disappeared into the service corridor. Mara glanced at him. "Want me to find out more?" Richard shook his head once. "Not yet." The next hour passed in its usual rhythm. Meetings, calls, signatures. But in the quiet moments between, Richard's mind replayed the image. A 10-year-old girl speaking a language most of his senior staff couldn't place, and doing it with the calm ease of someone greeting an old friend. It wasn't just unusual. It was deliberate. By the time the rain began to let up, he'd decided he would speak to her. Not now, not in passing, but soon, and in a way that would leave her nowhere to hide. By late afternoon, the clouds had thinned to a pale wash, the rain tapering into the kind of drizzle that clung to the glass but no longer blurred it. The office was quieter, half the staff tucked away in meetings, the other half trying to finish work before the day's end. Claire was polishing the brass handles on the lobby doors when Richard Hale stepped out of the elevator alone. No jacket, no briefcase, just his measured, unhurried stride. Lena sat cross-legged beside the supply closet, the paperback open across her knees. Richard stopped a few feet away. "What are you reading?" Lena looked up slowly. Her voice was calm, almost neutral. "A story about a boy who walks across the desert to find his brother." "That in English?" She shook her head. "No." He glanced at the cover. "What language?" Her braid slipped forward over her shoulder as she adjusted the book. "Arabic." He nodded, but didn't press. "And earlier, with Mr. Petrov, that was Romanian?" "Yes." His questions came like stepping stones, evenly spaced. "How many languages do you speak?" A pause. 9. She didn't look away when she said it, but there was no pride in her tone. Just fact. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, not in doubt, but calculation. "Where'd you learn them?" "Different places. Different people." She turned the page without breaking eye contact. Claire emerged from the lobby doors, catching the tail end of the exchange. "Mr. Hale, can I help you with something?" Richard glanced at her briefly, then back to Lena. "Not at the moment." He started toward the hallway, but stopped after 2 steps. "Do you know where the executive lounge is?" "Yes," Lena answered. "Show me." Claire's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. Lena closed the book, stood, and walked beside him. The route wasn't long, but Richard noticed how she carried herself. No rush, no hesitation. At one point, they passed a pair of associates in heated conversation. One threw a glance at the strange pairing, the CEO and the janitor's daughter. The look lingered, questions forming behind polite masks. When they reached the lounge, Richard held the door but didn't step inside. "Thank you." Lena gave a short nod, already turning back toward the service corridor. His voice stopped her. "Do you read as well as you speak?" She hesitated. "Yes." He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't soften the eyes. "Good to know." She left without another word. The next morning, the building's marble floors gleamed from the early cleaning. Claire and Lena were already on the 9th floor by 7:15, well before the real flow of office traffic began. The air was crisp with lemon polish, and the low hum of the HVAC was the only sound. Lena sat on a stool near the cart, reviewing the last chapter of her book. Her braid was tighter today, the pale yellow dress replaced by a neat gray cardigan and navy skirt, a hand-me-down that still carried the faint scent of cedar from her mother's closet. At 7:32, the elevator doors opened. Richard Hale stepped out, a black leather folder under one arm. He didn't walk past this time. "Claire," he said, inclining his head politely. "Could I borrow your daughter for a few minutes?" Claire blinked. The handle of her spray bottle paused mid-motion. "Sir, I have something upstairs she might help with. Won't take long." There was a short silence, the kind that makes people aware of walls and doors they're usually invisible to. Claire glanced at Lena, then back at Richard. "All right, if she's back before I finish this floor." Lena rose, slipping her book into the side pocket of the cart. They took the executive elevator. It was quieter, smoother than the main one, the kind where you barely feel the ascent. Richard pressed the button for the top floor, 13. A level most employees had never seen. When the doors opened, the contrast was immediate. Here, the carpets were deep and soft, muting every footstep. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and coffee beans ground fresh. Along the walls, framed black and white photographs showed the company's earliest years. Men in thick suits shaking hands, women in crisp blouses typing on wide metal typewriters. The light was warmer here, diffused through frosted glass panels. Far in the corner, a massive window overlooked the city. It wasn't a view Lena had ever imagined, rooftops stretching into the horizon, the river catching the early sunlight like scattered silver. Richard gestured toward a glass-walled meeting room. In here. Inside, the long walnut table gleamed. At one end, a laptop sat open beside a stack of documents. The text on the top page wasn't in English. Richard motioned to it. A memo from one of our partners in Ankara. My translation software made a mess of it. Thought you might take a look. Lena stepped forward, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. She didn't sit. She simply stood and read, her eyes moving steadily down the page. Richard didn't speak. He just watched, noting how she paused briefly in one section, the smallest crease between her brows, before continuing. When she looked up, she gave the translation in plain English, no hesitation, no notes. Richard's lips curved slightly. And you're certain? She nodded once. Yes. For a moment, the top floor was silent but for the faint tick of a wall clock. Richard closed the folder with care. Thank you, he said, and it was the first time his voice carried something like genuine respect. Richard didn't send her back right away. Instead, he walked with Lena along the quiet top-floor corridor, passing closed doors with discreet brass nameplates. They stopped at a side lounge, smaller than the main meeting spaces, where two leather chairs faced a low table stacked with journals and industry reports. He gestured toward one chair. Sit. She did, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Richard leaned against the edge of the opposite chair, not quite looming, but close enough to test how she'd handle proximity. She didn't shrink back. Your mother tells me you've never taken formal classes in any of these languages, he said. Lena shook her head. So who taught you? The answer came without hesitation. My grandfather, and people we met along the way. Along the way? She paused, as though deciding how much of the map to hand over. We moved a lot. Before we came here. Richard studied her expression. She spoke as if she were reading from a short list of facts, not telling a story. Military, he guessed. Her eyes flicked down for half a second, then back to him. Something like that. He noticed her right hand resting lightly over her left wrist, almost covering something. A faint mark, too straight to be accidental, peeked out from beneath her cuff. Not a scar from a playground fall. And the book downstairs? He asked. It was his, she said simply. My grandfather's. He said a language isn't just words. It's the way someone sees the world. Richard's gaze shifted slightly. And what did he do? She hesitated longer this time. He worked in places people don't usually talk about. There was weight in the way she said it. A 9-year-old might have parroted a line like that from a movie. But Lena said it the way someone repeats a truth they've lived beside. Richard didn't press further. Instead, he reached over to the low table, picked up a business magazine in French, and set it in front of her. Read the first paragraph. She did, smoothly, without glancing at him for approval. He closed the magazine, tucking it back into the stack. You're not an ordinary kid, Lena Marks. Her voice stayed even. I'm just me. From the corner of his vision, Richard saw Mara step quietly into the hall, glancing through the glass panel before leaving again. The moment between them felt contained, almost sealed off from the rest of the building. Richard finally straightened. Go back to your mother for now. As she rose, he noticed the way she adjusted her cardigan cuff, hiding that faint mark on her wrist again. A habit, not an accident. Back on the 9th floor, the mop bucket rattled as Claire wheeled it into the supply closet. Lena slipped in behind her, perching on the low stool by the wall. Claire didn't speak right away. She was rinsing a rag under the faucet, her shoulders slightly tense. Not with anger, but with the guarded caution of someone who knows attention from the wrong places can change a life. You went upstairs? She finally asked. Lena nodded. What did he want? A translation. Claire wrung out the rag, water dripping onto the tile. Did you give it to him? Yes. The exchange could have ended there, but Claire's voice softened. Your grandfather used to say that sooner or later, someone notices. Usually when you're not ready for it. Lena glanced at the mop leaning in the corner. I was ready. For a moment, the sound of rain against the high windows filled the silence. Claire kept her hands busy, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere far from polished floors and brass handles. When Lena was 6, they'd left a small town near the coast with 2 suitcases and an envelope of photographs. The air there had smelled like salt and engine oil, and the evenings were always loud with gulls. Before that, there had been other places, an inland city where Lena learned her first words of Russian from a neighbor's son, a village where she and her grandfather traded English for Turkish phrases with an old shopkeeper. Her grandfather, Daniel Marks, had been a man of exact habits, coffee black at dawn, stories told only after sunset. He'd never talked about his work directly, but sometimes he'd leave the room mid-conversation to take a call in another language, returning with his expression smoothed back into neutrality. The only story he told more than once was about the time he'd been stationed in a country where the wrong word could close a door forever. Language is a key, he'd told Lena, tapping her forehead gently. You keep it sharp, it'll open things you didn't even know were locked. He died when Lena was 8. Claire sold the house 2 weeks later. The moving never stopped until they landed here, in a city where anonymity felt like safety. But anonymity also meant invisibility. Claire rinsed the mop one more time, not looking at her daughter. People upstairs live by a different set of rules. You don't owe them more than you want to give. Lena pulled her cardigan sleeve down over her wrist again. I know. And she did. But she also knew that sometimes, giving just enough could change the shape of a day. The following day, Lena was helping her mother restock paper towels in the 9th floor restrooms when Mara appeared in the doorway. Her tailored navy dress and precise bun looked out of place among the scent of bleach and the echo of dripping taps. Mr. Hale needs you upstairs, Mara said. She didn't address Claire, but the words were loud enough for her to hear. Claire's eyes flickered to Lena. No explanation came, just a quiet, go on, be polite. The executive elevator was already waiting. Mara stood beside Lena during the ride but didn't speak. When the doors opened on the top floor, the air felt heavier. Not from heat, but from the way voices carried here, measured and deliberate. They entered a glass-walled meeting room. Around the table sat 6 people in suits, all older than Lena, all looking up when she walked in. At the head was Richard. He gestured toward the empty chair beside him. This is Lena Marks. She's going to help us with a small issue. On the screen at the far end of the table was an email chain, dense text in Mandarin, with a few scattered English words. This is from one of our Shanghai partners, Richard explained. The automated translation gave us something unusable. I want the actual meaning. Not word for word, context. The room was quiet. One man leaned back, skepticism plain on his face. From her, he asked under his breath, but not quietly enough. Richard didn't answer him. Instead, he turned to Lena. Take your time. She stepped closer to the screen, reading without moving her lips. A few sentences in, her brow tightened. She recognized the tone, not just a formal update, but a warning wrapped in courtesy. She began speaking in English, her voice steady. They're concerned about the delivery timeline. There's a supply shortage, and they're asking if we can adjust our contract terms for this quarter. They also say that if we can confirm flexibility, they'll prioritize our shipments over others. The skeptical man straightened in his chair. That's not what my translator pulled. No, Lena said simply. Your translator missed the part about prioritizing us. It's between the lines, not stated directly, but clear if you know how they phrase favors. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Richard nodded once. That's exactly what I thought. Mara began typing notes. Someone else whispered to their neighbor. The skeptical man avoided Lena's gaze. Richard closed the laptop. Thank you, Lena. That's all for now. As she left the room, she noticed the change in air behind her. Not warm exactly, but no longer dismissive. They'd heard her. Whether they'd accept it yet was another matter. By mid-afternoon, the office had settled into its usual rhythm, punctuated by the quiet hum of keyboards and the soft squeak of rolling chairs. Lena returned to the janitor's closet only to pause at the threshold, noticing the subtle shifts in how people glanced her way. Nothing overt, no clapping or fanfare, but small changes, a nod held slightly longer, a pen set down mid-note, eyes lingering before flicking away. The real test came when a video conference with their Tokyo office suddenly needed real-time translation. The head of operations, Mr. Patel, muttered under his breath, "Let's see if she can actually keep up." Lena adjusted the cuffs of her cardigan, walked to a small side table, and sat at the laptop. The conference began. Voices in rapid Japanese filled the room. Charts appeared on screen, figures changing faster than anyone could transcribe. She listened, paused, then spoke succinctly in English, conveying the exact meaning and context of each line. She didn't embellish or dramatize. She simply delivered clarity. Around her, the room's energy shifted imperceptibly. Mara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to take notes. Richard watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his jaw slightly tense. The tension of anticipation, not doubt. Colleagues who had ignored her presence earlier leaned forward, trying to follow her words. One young analyst whispered, "How is she doing this?" to another, eyes wide. By the end of the call, all parties had a clear understanding. The Tokyo representatives had praised the company's responsiveness. Unaware, a 9-year-old had translated their concerns flawlessly. Richard stepped closer. "Well done." His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Lena's lips curved into the faintest smile. She closed the laptop and returned to her stool in the corner. Quiet, composed, as if nothing had happened, though everyone else's perception had shifted dramatically. Mara leaned over just enough to whisper, "That was impressive." Lena nodded slightly, not seeking praise. Her power was not in performance, but in presence. The whispers started spreading then, subtle at first. Colleagues returning from meetings remarking in hushed tones about the janitor's daughter who handled the Tokyo call. No one challenged the facts, only wondered how someone so small, so overlooked, could carry such weight. Lena folded her hands, feeling the quiet energy pulse around her. She had done nothing extraordinary, except show, without argument or fanfare, that her skill mattered. The room had shifted in ways it would take weeks to fully register, but the first proof was undeniable. Respect was beginning to arrive, unannounced, like a soft but unyielding current. By late afternoon, Lena was pushing the mop along the polished corridors when she noticed the first hints of change. Not everyone looked at her differently, at least, not yet. But in the corner of the break room, two analysts were speaking in low tones, glancing her way with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "Did you see her in the Tokyo call?" one said. "Yeah," the other whispered. "And she didn't just translate. She caught the nuance. The stuff our software missed." Lena kept walking, pretending not to hear. Her hands gripped the mop handle firmly, grounding her in routine. She had learned long ago that attention could be dangerous if not managed carefully. By midweek, the whispers had multiplied. A secretary mentioned her name in passing to another floor. A maintenance worker paused to nod respectfully when she passed. Even Mr. Patel, who had been skeptical, left a sticky note on her mother's desk. "Lena, that was excellent. Keep it up." Not everyone reacted positively. One senior analyst rolled his eyes when he heard the story, muttering, "A child? Really?" Yet even he found himself double-checking his translations, unsure if he had missed something. During lunch, Lena sat quietly in the corner of the cafeteria. She noticed conversations pause when her presence was near, as if colleagues were subconsciously acknowledging her unseen authority. The whispers weren't loud, but they carried weight, like small ripples across a still pond. Her mother, Claire, joined her for a brief moment, setting down a small container of soup. "They're talking," Claire said softly, glancing around the room. "I know," Lena replied simply, sipping her soup. "They're figuring it out." That evening, as Lena returned to mop the corridors, Mara approached again. This time, she didn't escort Lena but simply nodded, a subtle acknowledgement. No words were necessary. Mara understood that the first proofs of recognition were delicate, not dramatic. Even Richard's presence became lighter. In passing, he would make brief eye contact, a quiet signal that he noticed her skill and, more importantly, her composure. The Whisper Network had begun its work. Lena had not sought attention, but attention had found her. And with each hushed conversation, each cautious nod, the office shifted, a collective realization that greatness could exist in the least expected corners. By the end of the day, Lena returned to the supply closet, tired but steady. She placed her mop in its holder and straightened her cardigan, aware that the office's quiet murmurs now carried a new weight, a recognition of skill, and a subtle reshaping of respect. She didn't celebrate. She didn't announce herself. She simply existed in the space she had always occupied, now acknowledged, not by spectacle, but by truth. The next morning, Lena was tidying the small supply closet when Mara's voice called softly from the doorway. "Mr. Hale would like to see you in his office." "Now," she nodded, adjusting the straps of her backpack and walking down the hall. The elevator ride felt unusually long, the hum of the machinery echoing in the tight cabin. When the doors opened, she stepped into the familiar stillness of the executive floor, the scent of polished wood and faint citrus cleaner hanging in the air. Richard sat behind his wide mahogany desk, hands folded, eyes on the small screen of his laptop. He looked up as Lena entered. His navy suit was impeccable, his tie a deep burgundy, the quiet authority he always carried now softened by a trace of warmth. "Lena," he began, his tone measured but not cold. "Yesterday, you handled the Tokyo call flawlessly." She inclined her head, speaking only when necessary. "Thank you, sir. I'd like to formally offer you a position in our international communications team," he continued. "It's temporary at first, but there's room for growth. I want someone who can interpret not just words, but meaning, tone, and intention. I think you have that skill." Lena's brow furrowed slightly, thoughtful. "Sir, I don't want to be a token. I only want to contribute where it matters. If this is just for show." Richard shook his head. "It isn't. This is earned. And it's not about visibility or spectacle. It's about precision, clarity, and trust. If you accept, you'll work with me directly on cross-cultural projects that impact real decisions." The room felt charged, though Lena remained composed. She considered her mother, the long hours cleaning floors and emptying trash, the sacrifices no one noticed. She thought about the quiet confidence she carried, the discipline that had been instilled through years of practice and focus. "I'll do it," she said finally. "If it matters." Richard's eyes softened. "It matters. More than you know." As she turned to leave, Mara caught her arm gently. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "They're finally seeing you." Lena nodded, her expression unreadable, but inside, a small current of relief and anticipation ran through her. She had entered a new space, one where skill, not circumstance, dictated value. The elevator ride down felt lighter. The whispers from earlier days had already begun to shift the landscape of the office subtly, but now Lena had a new role, not just noticed, but entrusted. The offer was more than a job. It was acknowledgement. And in acknowledgement, she found quiet dignity, the first true recognition of her place in a world that had often overlooked her. Lena arrived early, the sun just cresting the glass facades of the city. The International Communications Office was starkly different from the quiet hum of the janitor's closet. Polished chrome desks reflected overhead lights. Digital panels displayed live metrics from offices around the globe, and the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans mingled with a cleaner, corporate scent. Her new uniform, a crisp white blouse with a navy cardigan, paired with neat slacks, felt foreign, though not uncomfortable. She smoothed the fabric over her shoulders and stepped toward the open-plan floor, trying to move with the same composed certainty she carried in every other space. Colleagues glanced up. Some offered polite smiles, others barely concealed curiosity, skepticism etched across their faces. One analyst, Thomas, barely 18 and keen to prove himself, muttered to a neighbor, "So, this is the janitor's daughter?" Lena heard, but her expression remained neutral. Words, she had learned, often said more about the speaker than the listener. Mara approached from across the room, notebook in hand. "People are curious," she whispered. "Just observe first. Speak when it matters." Lena nodded, moving to a workstation near the window. She set her bag down carefully, placing her notebook and pen beside it. The space was foreign yet precise, the rhythm of conversation brisk, technical terms flying fast enough to make an outsider dizzy. The first assignment came almost immediately, a call with the Paris office, where a document needed rapid translation and clarification. Lena listened intently, typing notes, her small hands steady, eyes sharp. She delivered the translation in smooth, clear sentences that captured not just the words, but tone and nuance. Observers leaned forward. Thomas's smirk faltered, a senior analyst named Elise whispered, She's good." By mid-morning, Lena had developed a quiet rhythm. She did not dominate conversation or seek attention. Instead, she absorbed information, parsed meaning, and responded with precision when called upon. Her presence, initially met with skepticism, began to settle into subtle acknowledgement. During a break, Mara handed her a small cup of tea. "It's not just skill they're watching," she said softly. "They're watching how you handle it. Stay yourself." Lena nodded, taking a careful sip. Outside, the city moved at a relentless pace, but inside, her control of the room felt like a quiet island of competence. By the end of the day, a shift had occurred. Conversations around her were softer, more careful. Small nods, subtle eye contact, and the occasional pause before critique indicated a slow but real evolution in perception. Lena returned home that evening, tired but composed. She had entered a new world, one of polished surfaces and sharp expectations, and survived it not through spectacle, but through quiet presence, measured action, and unwavering focus. The first day had passed. The real journey, proving that skill and dignity could speak louder than circumstance, was just beginning. It was mid-afternoon when the alert came through. A critical video conference with 3 overseas offices, Berlin, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo, was delayed because an urgent legal document contained ambiguities in multiple languages. The team's usual translator was unavailable. Richard looked around the room, then at Lena, his expression unreadable. "Lena," he said quietly, "can you handle this?" She nodded, her calm certainty steadying the subtle tension in the room. "Yes, sir." The conference room hummed with nervous energy. Colleagues adjusted chairs, shuffled papers, and muttered under their breath. Thomas shot a sidelong glance, his skepticism clear. Elise sat upright, trying to hide a flicker of anticipation. Lena, however, pulled her notebook from her bag, opened it with meticulous care, and began scanning the document. The camera feeds flickered to life. Berlin's team spoke first, their words fast and precise. Lena listened, translating in her mind before delivering the interpretation clearly, capturing nuance, intent, and legal subtlety. Tokyo followed, then Sao Paulo, each requiring rapid mental shifts between languages and legal jargon. Around her, the office grew quiet. Colleagues leaned in, subtle shifts in posture betraying growing admiration. Even Thomas, arms crossed, leaned forward slightly, the doubt in his expression softening. Richard remained silent, observing, but the faint nods and the slight tightening of his jaw revealed approval. Lena did not rush, did not flinch. She worked with precision, letting the words speak, letting the clarity of her skill reshape the room. An hour passed in tense, concentrated silence. Finally, she looked up, a single breath marking the end. The documents were clarified. The overseas teams nodded in agreement, relief flickering across the screens. No applause followed. No fanfare. Just a heavy, sudden quiet. A collective acknowledgement that the unexpected had occurred. A 10-year-old girl, overlooked, had delivered clarity and resolution under immense pressure. Elise whispered, almost to herself, I didn't think she could do it." Thomas didn't reply. He simply met Lena's gaze and nodded, a small gesture carrying the weight of grudging respect. Richard finally spoke. "Excellent work, Lena. You handled that flawlessly." She inclined her head, the faintest smile of acknowledgement, but her focus remained steady, her posture calm. It was not about recognition. It was about presence, skill, and precision, quiet power that demanded respect without needing to declare it. When the conference ended, the room remained still for a few moments longer, colleagues absorbing the impact. The whispers had evolved into quiet certainty. Lena's ability was real, her competence undeniable. That day, a subtle shift occurred. She was no longer invisible. The office had seen her work under pressure, and the collective perception had changed, silently, irrevocably, with dignity intact. The following Monday morning, Lena arrived at the office, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished tile floor. She noticed a small gathering near the main reception, a low hum of quiet conversation, hushed whispers that carried more curiosity than casual chatter. As she approached, she saw why. Beside the elevators, a small brass plaque had been installed. Lena Carver, Honorary Junior Liaison, International Communications. recognized for excellence and precision. The plaque was simple, elegant, and unassuming. Its surface gleamed softly in the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the brass catching subtle reflections from the polished floor. There were no extravagant ribbons or grand announcements, only the clean, dignified engraving of her name. Lena stopped, her hands lightly resting at her sides. She bent slightly forward, reading each word carefully. The letters seemed to glow with quiet validation. Every morning, she had navigated invisible corridors, unseen behind carts and cleaning supplies, and now her name, her presence, was permanent, etched into the very fabric of the place she had always moved through silently. Mara appeared beside her, notebook in hand, a soft smile lighting her face. "It's not just a plaque," she said gently. "They've seen you, and now they won't forget." Colleagues approached, some with tentative smiles, others with curiosity shadowed by lingering skepticism. Thomas lingered awkwardly, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he murmured, almost to himself, I didn't expect this to be real. Seeing your name there, it's something." Elise, who had first voiced her surprise at Lena's abilities, stepped closer and placed a brief hand on Lena's shoulder. "You earned it. Every translation, every minute of yesterday's conference, it's all yours." Her voice was low but sincere, carrying the weight of admiration without need for flourish. Lena's lips curved in a faint, composed smile. She didn't speak. The recognition, the acknowledgement, the subtle nods from colleagues, they all spoke louder than words ever could. Her fingers brushed lightly across the cool brass. The texture was smooth, but the engraved letters felt alive with significance. Every sacrifice of her mother, every quiet hour of practice, every invisible step she had taken in the hallways of the office culminated in this small, dignified symbol. Richard appeared then, hands in his pockets, adjusting his tie. His expression was calm, yet the slight narrowing of his eyes revealed restrained pride. "You've earned every bit of that, Lena. And soon, there will be more." Lena lifted her gaze to meet his, steady and composed. "I'm ready, sir." Around her, the office buzzed softly, yet she felt a stillness within, a quiet dignity reclaimed not through spectacle or applause, but through skill, presence, and truth. Her name now carried weight beyond her past role. It meant competence. It meant trust. It meant the quiet power of unseen excellence finally recognized. The plaque gleamed in the sunlight, unwavering and honest. And for Lena, that was enough. Later that afternoon, the office had returned to its usual rhythm. Papers shuffled, phones rang, and distant laughter echoed down the hallways. Yet for Lena, the world felt slightly different. The plaque beside the elevators remained visible in her mind's eye, a quiet testament to what had shifted. She returned to her desk, the same desk she had occupied for weeks, tucked away near the window. Mara approached first, her footsteps soft against the floor. She handed Lena a small folded note, the paper crisp and carefully creased. Lena opened it. "Thank you for showing me what patience and precision really look like. You've inspired me more than I can say." "Mara." Lena's fingers lingered on the words. She folded the note slowly and tucked it into her notebook. No flourish, no fanfare, just quiet acknowledgement, a gift of sincerity. Throughout the day, small gestures continued to arrive. Elise left a sticky note on her monitor. "I'll never underestimate the quiet ones again." Thomas, passing by the reception, offered a small nod, the faintest smile tugging at his lips, a private gesture of respect that spoke volumes without a single word. Even Richard had left a subtle acknowledgement. A single cup of coffee placed on her desk, a handwritten note tucked beneath it. "Your work speaks louder than my words ever could." "Well done." Lena accepted each gesture with the same calm composure she brought to her work. She did not need applause or public recognition. The quiet gratitude of those whose perceptions had shifted was far more meaningful. These small, personal affirmations reflected the ripple her presence had caused. Acknowledgement, respect, and inspiration, all quietly diffused throughout the office. In a rare moment of stillness, Lena gazed out the window. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the hallways she had once traversed unnoticed. For a moment, she allowed herself a small, private smile. She thought of her mother, of the long hours spent balancing work and care, of the silent lessons of perseverance and dignity she had learned at home. It was in these moments, the whispered thanks, the small notes, the private nods of recognition, that Lena felt the weight of true respect, not the kind demanded by circumstance, nor the kind forced by ceremony, but the kind earned by quiet skill, steadfast discipline, and unwavering presence. The office continued its hum around her, unaware of the internal victories taking place. Lena remained poised, a quiet force, acknowledging the gratitude offered, carrying it forward with calm dignity, and understanding that sometimes the most profound impact was the one that happened silently, within the hearts of others. By mid-afternoon, a low tension had settled over the office. The earlier excitement around Lena's recognition had quieted into a steady buzz, but one figure remained unshaken: Gregory Hale, the company's chief operations officer. A tall man in his late 50s, Gregory was always impeccably dressed: navy suit, crisp white shirt, polished shoes, and carried an air of authority that made even seasoned managers tread carefully. He approached Lena's desk without announcement. His expression was neutral, yet the sharpness in his eyes suggested he was weighing every detail, measuring, testing. "Lena," he began, his voice calm but edged with scrutiny, "I hear you've been elevated, recognized publicly for skills I'm told are extraordinary." Lena looked up from her notebook, meeting his gaze with the same composed steadiness she brought to every task. "Yes, sir. I'm grateful for the acknowledgement." Gregory's lips pressed into a thin line. "Grateful? That's admirable. But tell me this, and answer honestly. Is this recognition earned, or is it a courtesy, a symbolic gesture to appease the office?" The words were quiet but sharp, slicing through the calm of her desk. Around them, colleagues paused in passing, sensing the tension but not intruding. Lena's fingers rested lightly on her notebook. She considered the question, then spoke in her usual measured tone. "Sir, the recognition reflects the results of yesterday's work," she said. "Every translation was accurate, every interaction precise. No gesture, no symbolism, only the outcome of the task assigned." Gregory's eyes narrowed slightly. "Results, outcomes. Yet others may claim that skill can be exaggerated, that perception often outpaces reality. How do I know that you are as capable as they suggest?" Lena's gaze never wavered. She opened her notebook and pulled out a sheet she had prepared quietly. Concise notes from yesterday's task, all translations logged, timelines documented, and critical decisions recorded. She handed it to him with the calm poise of someone who expected scrutiny. "I documented everything," she said. "Every step, every decision. The results speak for themselves. You can verify each detail, sir." Gregory examined the notes, the crease of his brow deepening. For a long moment, silence hung between them, tense, almost tangible. Then, slowly, his shoulders relaxed. He looked up at Lena, and for the first time, there was a flicker of acknowledgement in his expression. "Impressive," he said, his voice quieter now, almost grudgingly admiring. "It seems the office may have underestimated you." Lena nodded, serene. "I only aim to do the work correctly, sir. Recognition is secondary." The interaction ended with no fanfare, no applause, only a subtle shift in power dynamics. Where skepticism had once existed, respect now quietly settled, measured, and earned. The very next morning, Lena's opportunity to silence the last doubts arrived without warning. A senior client from Geneva, Monsieur Laurent, known for his meticulous attention to detail, arrived unexpectedly. The CEO, Mr. Calloway, and Gregory Hale both happened to be in the lobby when the front desk reported a problem. Lawrence's interpreter had been delayed by weather, leaving him stranded in a meeting scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. The air in the conference hall was taut with urgency. The client stood near the window, muttering in rapid French to his assistant. Even without catching every word, Lena could read the tension in his body language, the rigid shoulders, the clipped hand movements. Calloway looked at Gregory. Gregory's jaw tightened. Then his eyes slid toward Lena, who had been quietly delivering some reports nearby. "Miss Adler," Gregory said, tone measured. "You speak French." Lena adjusted the strap of her satchel. "Yes, sir. Among others." Laurent glanced over, unconvinced. "And you are?" he asked in French. Lena's reply was smooth, flawless in pronunciation and tone. I'm here to assist you until your interpreter arrives, Monsieur Laurent. If you'll allow me. His expression shifted from mild irritation to interest. The meeting began. Lena translated every nuance, every subtle inflection, moving seamlessly between French, English, and at one point, German when an unexpected question arose. She didn't overstep. Her role was precise, invisible yet essential, ensuring the conversation flowed without a single misstep. By the time the meeting concluded, Laurent was smiling, shaking hands warmly with the executives. He turned to Gregory and, in English, said, "You have a remarkable young woman here. Don't waste her talent." Gregory gave the faintest nod toward Lena. Not an apology, but something closer to an acknowledgement earned the hard way. Lena simply gathered her notes and stepped aside, letting the moment belong to the work itself. She needed no applause. The proof had been delivered in real time, undeniable and complete. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows, washing the office in a muted gold. Most employees were packing up, conversations blending into a gentle background hum. Lena remained at her desk, quietly finishing a set of notes from the Laurent meeting. Mr. Calloway stopped by, no entourage, no formal summons. Just him, leaning slightly on the edge of her desk. "You know," he said, voice low, "Laurent told me this morning's meeting was one of the smoothest negotiations he's had in years. He credited you for it." Lena didn't look up immediately, finishing the sentence she was writing. Then she closed her notebook and met his gaze. "It wasn't just me. Everyone in that room contributed. I just made sure they understood each other." Calloway smiled faintly. "Still, not everyone could have done what you did." She tilted her head slightly, her tone calm but certain. "The world is full of people who can do remarkable things, Mr. Calloway. But most of them are never asked. And sometimes, they've been overlooked so long, they stop expecting to be asked at all." He studied her for a moment, expression thoughtful. "You're saying we don't look in the right places." "I'm saying," Lena replied, "we forget that skill, discipline, and dedication can live anywhere, not just in the titles and offices we're used to looking at." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but weighted with understanding. Calloway nodded slowly, as though mentally committing her words to memory. "Then maybe we should start asking in the right places," he said quietly. Lena's eyes softened, but she didn't reply. The point had been made. Words beyond that would only dilute it. Calloway gave her a small, respectful nod before walking away. Lena turned back to her desk, the golden light catching in her hair, the hum of the office returning to its normal rhythm. The lesson was not about her. It was about possibility, the kind that waits patiently in the quiet corners of the world until someone chooses to see it. The building was nearly empty when Lena finally stepped out of the elevator. The faint echo of her footsteps trailed down the polished hallway toward the janitor's supply room, her mother's station. Inside, the faint scent of cleaning solution mingled with the faint hum of an old radio. Her mother, Margaret, was sitting on a low stool, tying off a fresh trash bag. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Long day." Lena hung her satchel on a hook by the door. "Good day," she said simply. She reached into the side pocket of her bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. A thank you note written in careful French, signed by Monsieur Laurent. She handed it to her mother without explanation. Margaret's eyes moved slowly over the words. "You translated for him?" Lena nodded. "And a little more than that." Her mother didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She simply reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face, and placed the note back in her hands. "That's yours to keep." Lena tucked it into the back of her notebook, alongside an older item, a worn index card with a list of languages her father had taught her before he passed, each one written in his blocky handwriting. That card had traveled with her through every move, every job, every late-night study session. She ran her thumb over the faded ink, then closed the notebook. The weight of the day didn't feel like exhaustion. It felt like something else, something solid, earned. The two of them sat for a while in the quiet, the radio murmuring in the background. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, as if acknowledging the end of a chapter. Lena didn't imagine applause, or promotions, or grand speeches. The recognition she valued most was sitting right beside her, in the same small room where she had spent countless evenings waiting for her mother to finish work. Greatness, she thought, doesn't always need a stage. Sometimes it just needs someone to notice. And in that stillness, she knew someone had.